Using Photoshop as a safety tool allows you to remove supporting arms or to compile composite images together. In this instance, I've got the potato sack image open and I'm going to remove the supporting arm. The reason that we have the supporting arm there for this setup is because the baby can move at any time, and whilst the wrap is extremely supportive around the baby, it's not supporting the neck, which is why we have the hand there, making sure the baby doesn't move and doesn't injure itself at any point throughout the setup. So to remove this arm in Photoshop, you can see here that I've got a lot of negative space on the right side, and I have the arm on the left hand side. So quite simply, instead of using the clone tool, what I'm actually going to do is select a large area of this side of the image with my lasso tool. I'm going to feather that, so right click feather by about 55 pixels. Now I'm going to create a copy layer out of that, Command J, Command T, and I'm going to right click and flip it horizontally. So just going back, Command T puts it into transform, and that's the only way when you right click that you can actually flip this selection. So we're going to flip that horizontally and we're going to drag it to the other side of the image. So you can see here it is slightly different to the background on this side, and that's because the light was coming in from the right hand side, but we can adjust that in a moment. What I'm going to do is hit enter, and I'm going to bring the opacity of that layer. You can see that selection there, so if we turn the background off, there's that selection. I'm going to bring the opacity of that layer down so we can see underneath it, just to make sure that I'm covering everything there that I need to cover. Now I'm going to bring that opacity back up to 100%. I'm going to add a layer mask, and I'm going to invert that layer mask. So it's now a white layer mask. I'm going to hit Command I and invert that layer mask to make it black, which means now I need to use a white paintbrush to paint that layer back onto the background of the image. So I'm bringing the opacity of my brush up. You can see down here, I've got my white brush selected, and I'm going to paint over the arm that is supporting the baby. I'm going to come in nice and close to the baby here. What you do have to be careful of when you are painting on the shadow side, that you're not removing any of the shadows. You want to make it look realistic. So as I'm painting this on now, and I'm just going to zoom out so we can see everything. You can see where I've painted. Hit the backslash key, there it is there. I now want to bring the darkness of that layer down slightly. So I'm going to go click back onto the layer off the mask, and I'm going to go down, bring up my curves, Command M, and now I'm going to bring down the midtones there in that selection. I'm going to click on the little hand, and then I'm going to come over here into this area of the image, and it's going to select the part of the curve that I want, and I'm going to bring that down. As I bring it down, you can see that changing there into where it blends the most. So we've got before and after. Now what I can do is bring back the opacity, and I can take that layer away from parts that you don't necessarily need it on there. So clicking back on the mask, we can go back to our brush. Now I want to have a black brush to take that layer off the areas that I don't want it on. So hitting the X key is going to change it to a black brush, and I'm going to bring the opacity down to about 50%. Make sure the edge is nice and soft on my brush, and then just bringing it back away from those shadows there. Going to increase the opacity. Now as we paint over the background in a moment, we're going to merge those two together. But in terms of removing an arm, that is a really quick way without using the clone tool and without having to spend a lot of time getting the texture and everything right in that background. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to flatten those and I'm going to create a new copy layer. Now with my clone tool I can come in and just remove some of these little distracting highlights and shadows in here. Make sure that it's on the right mode, normal, it's about 80%. Bring the hardness of that brush down. So once I have removed that arm, then I can start to edit the image. What I would do next is soften that background even more, adjust the red skin tones and a little bit of the light there, and use the liquify tool to remove any lumps and bumps. But that's pretty much it. Using Photoshop is a great way to reduce any potential dangers or risks when photographing babies. And I would much rather spend more time in Photoshop than I would in the studio trying to balance a baby or risking the safety of them. Plus, I always want to make sure that my clients are nice and comfortable with the way I am treating and handling their baby.